Hello everyone, welcome back to the Retro Horror Academy. My name is Daniel Richardson, and today we're going to be looking at the year in horror, 1948. There's only 2 films released this year, and we'll rank both of them. But we do have the largest inducting class into our Horror Hall of Fame. We got 5, count them, 5 inductees. So you know what, without any further ado, let's just jump into this thing. We're going to start things off with the Horror Hall of Fame. The first inductee is Carl Theodore Dreer, also known as just Carl the Dreer by his friends. He was a Danish director and writer, and he's considered to be one of the greatest directors of all time, directing films such as The Passion of Joan of Arc and Vampire. Some films he did that we did not cover on this channel include They Caught the Ferry and The Person's Widow. However, on this show, he is known as the director of Vampire. The reason he definitely gets put into the Hall of Fame is his film looked so, it was so ahead of its time. The look, the vibe, the feel of the film. But, it literally kind of paved the way for, like, that surreal nightmare quality, Again, aside from, I guess, the German expression, people, this guy really was doing like the only surreal stuff out there, And so, yeah, I don't know. I was a big fan of his work and glad to put him into the Hall of Fame. Up next, Wallace Ford. He was a British actor, and he was always known for playing kind of like the wisecracking, type characters. The only thing we didn't cover him on here, he did a movie called The Rogue's Tavern. However, on this show, we know him for being in such films as Freaks, Night of Terror, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, and The Ape Man. To me, he was always the stereotypical, like, when you need, like, that fast-talking 1940s, like, ace reporter, you get this guy. You get Wallace Ford. And I feel like, especially in the horror films he did, he, with the exception of Freaks, because Freaks was, he definitely played more of a serious character. But in the other movies, he just kind of added, like, that sidekick character, just added a lot of levity and comic relief. I thought that worked out very well, actually. So yeah, glad to have him jump aboard as well. Our third inductee, Victor Halperin. This is an American writer, director, and producer. Oddly enough, though, the 2 genres he's known for is horror and romance. Can you believe it? On this show, we know him as the director of White Zombie, Supernatural, which he also produced, Revolt of the Zombie, which he also wrote, and Torture Ship. Again, I feel like, this guy's definitely going to be more known. His name's going to be more associated with, like, White Zombie, Revolt of the Zombies, and maybe even Torture Ship. But I gotta say, I think my favorite of this batch is Supernatural. Again, just, a guy who, is pumped out. So, for better or for worse, whatever you may think of him, they are iconic titles in the world of horror. So yeah, there you go. I mean, the guy who directed the movie who gave Rob Zombie the band name White Zombie, hey, you get your spot in the Horror Hall of Fame, buddy. Our fourth inductee is, hope I don't butcher the last name, Carlos Villatoro. He's a Mexican writer and actor. Of course, I think the movie we didn't cover was a film called Two Monks. However, on this show, we know him as the lead in El Fantasma del Convento. If you guys, or the Phantom of the Covenant, or the Convent, sorry. If you guys remember when I covered this back in the day, I love this movie. I thought this movie was great. Again, I was not expecting much going into it, and I wound up. In fact, it's definitely my top 10 films that we've covered on this show. So yeah, literally just a personal favorite of mine. Glad to get him in there. And finally, we have Bill Woods. Of course, he is the titular Maniac in the film Maniac. Again, kind of a one-hit wonder. Only did one film. I don't think he did a whole lot beyond this anyways. But what a character. And again, just another personal favorite performance of mine. So yeah, in the Hall of Fame. So, kind of a recap here. Carl Theodore Dreyer, Wallace Ford, Victor Halperin, Carlos Villatoro, and Bill Woods guys, welcome to the Horror Hall of Fame. Take your seat among the greats, and yeah, welcome. Alright guys, so again, only 2 films came out in 1948, so let's get to them. At number 2, and the winner of the Silver Skull Award, I'm talking about The Creeper. Basically, this mad scientist creates this serum that will turn you into a cat-like killer. So this was technically the only horror film to be produced by Hollywood between the years 1947 and 1951. And I know you're thinking like, well, wait a minute, we got another movie coming out. Well, the other movie's definitely going to be more classified as a comedy than a horror film. But so it's just strictly horror. Yeah, this movie is the only film in like a 5-year span. That is just sad. Anyways, so this movie actually got sued because it took its title. There's a radio show that was on at the same time that was called The Creeper, and they sued and they settled out of court and everything, which I thought was kind of weird because this also, it shared the title shared the name of a Universal, horror monster, The Creeper, played by Rondo Hatton. Now, granted, they didn't ever do a movie that was just called The Creeper. He did Brute Force, and I forget the other one, and we covered it. But anyways, he did those films. But yeah, it was like, House of Horrors, that was it. And but like I said, he was a creeper, but they never called the film The Creeper. So I guess Universal didn't never run that issue, or they knew they didn't have the rights to it, and that's why they never called the film The Creeper. But either way, there you have it. This movie got really bad reviews when it came out. The only other little tidbit here I got is the actor that played Dr. Van Glack, Eduardo Sinanelli. Like Spanish and Italian mix there. Anyways, this dude got top billing, and only because I guess it's supposed to be like a red herring to the audience because they wanted you to think this guy was the mad scientist. And I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't pay attention to the posters or top billing or that stuff because I honestly didn't know hardly any of the people in this movie. However, whenever I was watching it, yeah, the guy that they're clearly like zooming in on and showing him do some shady shit, it's like, yeah, I thought he was the villain too. And I'll be honest with you, like, it worked. Like, that red herring worked because honestly, the whole film, I assumed he was the mad scientist behind it all. I will admit, I did figure it out before the reveal, but we were well into the third act before I figured it out. So anyways, so one thing about this movie, I hate that horror is coming to an end. We're at the end of the horror cycle right now, and we're in a drought, a dead zone, if you will. However, my God, I'm getting sick of these cat people knockoffs. Were cats that terrifying back then? Like, was this a thing? I just was unaware. I don't know. I'm sick of cat men. That's ridiculous. Let's please move on. And this whole thing was just, this woman was freaking out how she saw a regular cat. And I'm just like, are people, I don't know. Unless you're a mummy, you shouldn't be afraid of the cats, right? Like, am I wrong? Am I wrong here? I don't know. This movie was just kind of... I mean, I like the performances. I like that because of the glaring red herring of that one guy. When everyone else is acting kind of shady, it makes you kind of question, like, well, wait a minute. Well, who's the bad guys? Who's good? So it did kind of keep you guessing an aspect, and I like that, but... Beyond that, there's nothing really to add here or recommend. It's really hard to be like, oh yeah, Creeper, it was a good movie. It really, it was okay at best, and I'm being very, very generous there. IMDb actually gave this a 4.9, and yeah, it's probably about right. So anyways, that was The Creeper. So we're moving now to number 1, winner of our Golden Skull Award and the number 1 horror film of 1948. I'm talking about Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Basically, the Wolfman, he's trying to warn Abbott Costello that Dracula is up to no good, and that he has a plan, and that plan has something to do with taking Costello's brain out of his body and putting it inside the Frankenstein's monsters. I'm going to just kind of rapid fire some of these tidbits off at you because there was a lot of them for this movie. Of course, it stars Abbott Costello, Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Jr., and Glenn Strange. Turns out Costello, I'm guessing both of them, but Costello especially did not like the script, apparently. Didn't even want to do the movie. Took a little bit more money, and he got to pick the director to get him to actually come aboard. Take a drink. Sorry. Speaking of director, though, it's funny because apparently him and he would go on record to say that he actually had a difficult shoot with this film because I guess, excuse me, for the most part, Abbott Costello would just disappear from set. They'd just be absent half the time, which kept pushing it back and everything else. And yeah, so was not ideal for the director. However, this would go on to become Universal's highest-grossing film of the year. So, the one time they dip their feet back into horror, it pays off for them. Sorry, taking another drink. Oh, there we go. All right. This would lead to many sequels. Well, maybe not sequels, but a lot of Abbott Costello meet insert monster here films. So, I guess how it kind of went was from 1941 to 1945. Abbott Costello was like Universal's biggest stars. However, their popularity was starting to wane. They were on the verge of breaking up, actually, because apparently they were fighting all the time. And they were both actually suffering from health issues, both of them. So it was just kind of like, this is probably going to be the end of it. However, it was this movie that kind of brought them back, and, they kind of took off from there. Or took back off, I should say, from there. So initially they were going to call this film, it was actually called The Brain of Frankenstein. And it was also going to include The Mummy and Dracula's Son. It also had a larger role for the Invisible Man as well, instead of just the cameo they give him in this. But anyways, when they kind of rewrote the script, they cut some things out, and that's what they cut out right there. As I mentioned before, there was constant fighting between the director and the two stars, Abbott and Costello. He actually went on record, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he said something along the lines of like, the monster actors were as nice as could be. However, the real monsters was Abbott and Costello. So I always hated to hear because I'm a fan of Abbott and Costello, and I'll get more on that later on. But I don't know, kind of hearing that they're dicks in real life kind of sours me a little bit on them. Anyways, apparently there's no Jack Pierce doing the makeup this time around. This is around time Universal was making some heavy cuts, and if you notice, this is actually Universal International. They did a merger with another company. And there's a whole new regime taking over, and there's a whole new group and everything else. So, but anyways, yeah. So, but they did a lot of cuts. In fact, Lon Chaney Jr. was one of them got cut, but they brought him back basically for nostalgia's sake, because he was he's the only guy who ever played the Wolfman, so they had to bring him back. But yeah, Jack Pierce's legendary makeup, not so much. So there's some debate. I've read conflicting reports on this next little bit, but the truth is Glenn Strange broke his foot while he's filming. Now, it's the same scene, but I said I've read it two different ways here. So one account says that he broke his foot because he threw when the Frankenstein's monster, when he throws the woman out the window, the surgeon or whatever. Apparently, when he throws the stunt woman out, her harness, the swing or the strings, it swung her back through the window and it hit him and he fell and broke his foot. But the other report says that he threw her, and then as he's coming back, he just tripped. But then the stunt lady also got injured because there was too much slack in her harness. And either way, whenever she fell, she busted her hip up pretty bad. So yeah, that was kind of a big deal right there. Either way, though, Glenn Strange broke his foot and was rushed to the hospital. Well, Lon Chaney would actually go ahead and get in the Frankenstein monster suit and would finish the scene for him. So I thought it was kind of neat that Lon Chaney would play Wolfman and Frankenstein's monster in the same movie. So there you have it. So despite not being in the film at all, Boris Karloff actually did some publicity for this movie. Universal paid him to pose for some pictures outside of a theater. Picture of him going, walking up, looking at the poster and buying a ticket and going into the movie and everything. And apparently, because I assume they must have reached out to him to be in the movie itself, and he probably just said no because he retired that role a long time ago. And he's already been kind of on record saying he was kind of sick of doing certain types of horror movies. Like when he did the movie, the Cat People. I'm blanking on the guy's name, the producer. Anyway, when he did his movies, he was all about doing more adult psychological horror films, whereas he kind of looked down on these, I guess. And so he went on record saying he agreed to do it as long as he didn't have to watch the film for real. And I was like, oh man, Boris, man, don't be such a dick, shit. So anyways, there you have it. in certain countries, they actually would cut out most of, if not all, of the scenes that involved any kind of monsters. And I thought that was kind of crazy because I'm like, I kind of want to see that cut. Because apparently, like, Australia was one of those countries that did that. And I'm thinking, Australia, really? Like, I want to see the original Australian cut of it. Like, what would be left if you took the monsters out of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein? It's like, well, then what do you actually have? What movie are you actually showing at this point? Because sure as hell ain't what you got, your final product or anything. Val Lewton, my God, I couldn't think of the guy's name. I was talking about Boris Karloff's, when he did the Val Lewton film, he liked it but didn't like anything else. Anyways, so yeah, Australia and other countries would cut out full scenes of monsters. So it's like, what? Wow. That just seems crazy to me, and I would love to see a version of that because that seems like a wacky, weird movie to watch. So the reviews were mostly good. I thought it was kind of interesting, though. It got bad reviews, like, exclusively in New York, right? But it turns out the LA critics at the time would call the critics of New York, they called them the boo-gie-men of Broadway. Because apparently these dudes were just like hitmen, and they just like would shit on everything. Just, bunch of nerds trying to make themselves feel good, I guess. And yeah, the LA critics called them out on it. So like this movie got good reviews, except from the New York crowd. However, upon reading some reviews today, this is definitely more in a negative light than it was back then. So there you go. Which I think a lot of reviews are more the fact that it just killed the horror genre at the time. Definitely made the once scary monsters goofy, but you can't really say this did it because they were kind of already on their way out before. So anyways, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. There would be 4 more Abbott and Costello Meet movies that were made after this. Turns out Lon Chaney Jr. did not like the finished product of this film. Has gone on record saying as much. This was the second and last time that Bela Lugosi would play Dracula, which really shocked me. I assumed he played him more. No, he hasn't. This is it. This and Dracula was the only 2 movies that he was Dracula in. Now, he's played vampires in other movies, and he even played, like, a version of Dracula in, I forget what the name of the movie was, but the movie that Fox did that was, like, I think it was The Vampire's Return is what it was. He played, basically a non-copywritten version of Dracula because they didn't get the rights to it. But yeah, only played Dracula twice, which insane. This would be Bela Lugosi's last movie for a major studio. This is it, his last little swan song. He'd be doing nothing but independence after this. Apparently they hired a court jester, some comedic guy who show up on the set and just kind of keep the energy levels up. So he was constantly goofing off, cracking jokes, and even would ruin takes just to kind of keep everybody on their toes and laughing. And apparently Bela Lugosi was a huge fan of this until the guy started, cracking wise during his scenes. And apparently there was a scene where as Dracula's coming down the stairs, the guy runs up behind, says something wacky, and runs down the stairs real quick. And Bela got pissed and was just like, you know what, this is serious. And he turned around, like, storms off the set or whatever. Which I was like, that's pretty funny. We mentioned in a previous episode, I forget the movie he was in, but actor Ian Keith was supposed to, he was actually in line to play Dracula back in 31. However, Bela Lugosi would eventually get the role. Well, they went to Ian Keith again to play Dracula this time around. And the only reason he didn't play it was because Bela Lugosi's manager basically went straight to Universal's like head honchos in the office. It was just like, hey, like basically shamed him into hiring Bela Lugosi. Like, hey, Bela created that character. This is Bela's character. Like, that character wouldn't be nothing without Bela Lugosi. How are you going to literally go around and not cast him? And so that's how Bela Lugosi got the job. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a totally different group, a totally new regime, and they still have it out for this guy. Like, I don't know, what was Bela Lugosi like in real life? Because from all accounts, he was a decent guy. He had his demons and whatnot, but it never really affected his work, from what I understood. At least not this early. And it's like he keeps redeeming himself. He keeps getting good reviews, and yet Universal keeps fucking him over. I don't know. I just don't know. Anyways, apparently there was another movie that was on the studio lot, and they just finished wrapping their movie up. And so Glenn Strange and Lon Chaney Jr. went to their wrap party dressed up in their monster makeup outfit, whatever, and quote unquote started hamming it up at the party. So good times, good times. This would be the last Universal film to feature Dracula, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein's monster in the same film until Van Helsing in 2004, which that boggles my mind too, because I'm thinking to myself, I get that they think horror's dead now, but it's like when we get the Hammer movies in the 50s and 60s and they're doing big numbers, did they not think to dust off the Universal monsters and bring them back? Like, it just seems crazy to me that like this is it. This is the end of them. I don't know. Just weird to me. Another little interesting tidbit here: the three actors, Glenn Strange, Bela Lugosi, and Lon Chaney Jr., they have all played the Frankenstein monster at one point in their career, which is pretty cool. Quentin Tarantino said this movie was one of his influences when he was learning kind of how to blend genres properly. So, kind of neat there. Glenn Strange had more screen time in this movie than he had in House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein combined. Now, I don't feel like he was in this movie that much as much either, but whatever. This is a favorite film of Hugh Hefner. And finally, Vincent Price. He was the voice, obviously you could tell, the voice of the Invisible Man at the end. Oddly enough, though, when they do Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man, no Vincent Price. Weird. So, what did I think about this movie? I don't know. I was kind of disappointed. I always grew up hearing like how funny this movie was, how great the Abbott and Costello, meets characters movies were. And I was expecting a lot more. Now, I've never seen an Abbott Costello film. I'm familiar with their Abbott Costello show and then the Colgate Comedy Hour, which they were the host of, for many years. And so I'm very familiar with their bits on this, on that show. Not so much, beyond that. So going into this, I'm a huge Abbott Costello fan, but then I see this movie and says, I don't know, I knew Costello or Abbott's a bit of a dick, and to hear they fought a lot in real life probably did mirror this a lot, because it's just like, I don't know, it's not funny to me, just him constantly just shitting on Costello. Like, I don't know, didn't find it humorous. Again, making the monsters look goofy, I'm okay with that to a certain degree, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but like, it doesn't get serious till like the end when Costello's like, kind of locked up and he's about to get the lobotomy. Like, that's the only time like I really feel like, we're about to get into some shit. Beyond that, though, it's just, I don't know. It is what it is. It is cool seeing, Bela Lugosi back, Lon Chaney Jr. as, I think the only, as a Wolfman, I think the only thing is I really wish we could have had Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster. But I was always a fan of Glenn Strange being the monster. I think that's really the main thing he's going to be known for in the world of horror anyways. So, get that. And I will say, of every movie leading up to this, so up to this point, we had Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein. They're called the Monster Rally movies. I always call them Monster Mash films. This is the first time we actually get a good fucking brawl between monsters. Because leading up to that, we don't at all. We get, Wolfman and, Frankenstein's monster, basically, colliding at the end of a film. And then the other movies, it's just like they kind of interact from time to time, but nothing major. This is the first time we get Dracula and Wolfman just beating the shit out of each other, with Frankenstein's monster just on the loose, running rampant through the mansion while this chaos is going on back. I don't know. I actually love that aspect of it. That was the one thing I liked about this movie, was the insane fight scenes we got with Frankenstein and, with Wolfman and Dracula. Take another drink. So, anyways, but beyond that, I didn't think the comedy worked as well. Not all of it. I mean, I'm not completely shitting on it. There were some funny parts in it, but not enough for me to be like, I'm really excited to see more Abbott and Costello meets movies, because if this was their big, I hear they don't get much better. Like, this is kind of the best of the grouping, so it's like, shit. So, anyways, however, this movie does have a 7.3 on IMDb, a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, and this thing grossed $3.2 million back then. So, you know what? Who am I to say, I guess? Either way, it is our number one film of 1948, a horror film. So, there you have it, Winner of the Golden Skull. So, let's do a quick recap before we get out of here. Our Horror Hall of Fame inductees were Theodore Dreer, Wallace Ford, Victor Halperin, Carlos Venatoro, and Bill Woods. And our two films of 1948, or two horror films of 1948, was at number 2, the Silver Skull winner, The Creeper, and our Golden Skull winner at number 1, Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. So there you guys have it. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. That was 1948 in horror. On behalf of the Retro Horror Academy, my name is Daniel Richardson, and you're dismissed.